Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Brawn Body Health and Fitness Podcast. I'm so glad that you're joining us today. Today I'm joined by TEDx speaker, best-selling author, Sleep Science Academy founder, Devin Burke. And Devin is no stranger to the podcast. In fact, this is actually the same episode we released about a year ago. However, we've gone back in and we have remastered the audio. We've made some minor improvements here and there. We've tried to clean up the overall quality. And of course, we gave it that new cover art to give it a nice little facelift. Sleep is one of the most underrated components of your health and fitness. And I felt like it was great to pull this episode back up, refresh it, revitalize it, and make it relevant again. So I hope that you enjoy this episode all about sleep. Devin, welcome to the show. Excited to have you on.
Excited to be here, Daniel. Thanks for having me.
So for those who aren't familiar with you and your work and what you do, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so we were talking just before we jumped on here. I was actually going to become a physical therapist, and I took a little trip around Europe, 2.5 months. Came back, realized I felt I wasn't that passionate about it, and that sent me on a decade-long journey of studying all different types of modalities. I like to call them health technologies, from nutrition to psychology to mindfulness to all these different things. And ultimately, it led me to studying sleep science when I was working with a lot of high-performing entrepreneurs. And one of my clients was having issues with his sleep, and he asked me if I knew anything about sleep. I didn't. I thought it was a waste of time. Didn't know anything around. I literally knew nothing about sleep. And so I said, hey, well, listen, let me look into it. And I was just like, oh my gosh, how did I not know how important sleep is to every aspect of health? And so the more I studied it, the more fascinated I became with it. And then I started to look at what was available for people, which is really sleeping pills and something called CBTI. And I said, hey, you know what? I think I might be able to introduce some of the other things that I studied over, the last decade to really help people. So that's what I did with him. And I said, hey, if I can help one person, I can help, thousands or millions of people. And that led me up to founding Sleep Science Academy, which is what we do. We help people all across the nation get and stay asleep naturally. And that's I'm a TEDx talker. I'm, best-selling book, The Sleep Advantage. But I'm just passionate about giving people the tools to improve their sleep and also to inspire them to actually prioritize and protect it and understand how important it is. So that's a high level there.
Right. I love that you're so passionate about that, because we look at the statistics on sleep disorders in America and they're alarming. 25% of the population, last I checked, reports insomnia, and 20% have sleep apnea. Like, this is alarming stuff here. And the numbers continue to climb as the years continue to pass. Why do you think people struggle so much with their sleep?
That's such a great question, and I love that we're leading off right into it. There's a couple of reasons. The first reason is we are completely disconnected from our natural rhythms because of technology, as well as because of the amount of stress. 100 years ago, if you looked at, we weren't spending all day on social media or behind computers or fluorescent lights. We didn't have the demands on our minds specifically that we were farmers, most we were hunters and gatherers. There wasn't this complexity that was, sort of overriding the CPU called the brain. And so with that comes some disease and disorders. So I like to say that if you're not sleeping well, it's just a sign that something in your life is out of balance. And, it's really about understanding, well, where are these stresses coming from? Your environment, the thoughts you think, your relationships. There's so many areas that we can experience stress. It could be overtraining. So there's a lot of factors, and it really depends on your unique situation. But ultimately, it's technology and stress. Those are the reasons why we're continuing to see these numbers grow.
I'm so glad you brought that up. For those who haven't listened to our recent episode with Jimmy St. Louis, go back and listen to that, because we actually bring up stress in the form of dietary and nutrition approach in that episode. And we talked about how insulin shuttles serotonin into the brain. Serotonin is the precursor to melatonin. And we see people eating these highly processed, high carbohydrate meals for breakfast and lunch, not knowing that they're spiking their melatonin levels early on in the day. So you brought it up perfectly. Our sleep
Yeah,
cycle, our circadian rhythm is just completely botched.
yeah, and to add on to that, also the microbiome. So there's a lot of research that shows now, that the health of the microbiome is linked to not just sleep, but everything. And most people, because of what you just mentioned, eating processed foods, eating the wrong type of foods, they have dysbiosis, they have leaky gut, they have their body is not digesting food, and that creates a lot of issues with melatonin production, serotonin production. I mean, it creates so many issues. That's why we're seeing also the rise in things like Hashimoto's, autoimmune disease. It's all it really there's where it's just I like to just broadly blanket it as physical stress, and it's often like this stress bucket gets filled up, and then it eventually overflows, and that's when we experience these disorders like insomnia, like IBS, Crohn's, colitis, heart disease, diabetes, all these things that these lifestyle diseases. It's just because our stress bucket gets filled up, and that's insomnia is no different. It's a disorder that comes from not really taking care of ourselves.
Right. And people are learning to accept these things as almost common practice, right? Just kind of part of life almost. And they forget that it really doesn't have to be that way. Having something like you mentioned, IBS, having IBS is not normal. That's not a sign of good health. And this is ultimately why sleep matters to our body so much. It's our chance for our body to reset itself, recycle things, clean things out, promotes autophagy,
Yeah.
allows our body to repair from all the damages that we inflict upon it. Why else do you think sleep matters?
I mean, emotionally, it matters too. So not everything you just said is so poignant, and it's so important for people to understand. But emotionally, so if and when you don't get quality sleep, specifically the stage of REM sleep, rapid eye movement, which usually happens in the fourth quarter of the night, so right before you wake up, that's why you remember your dreams. That's when our bodies are paralyzed. That's really when we're working out the emotional, traumas of the day. That's when we're creative problem solving. That's when, the our emotions are getting regulated. And there's some interesting studies, Daniel, that show that when you don't get enough REM sleep, you actually, when during the day, you can't really interpret emotion as well. Like you misperceive emotion. So like you're walking down the street, somebody might look at you and you might take that the wrong way just because you're tired versus, they were just looking at you. They weren't looking at you crossed or, so it's really interesting. There's some really interesting studies that show how it impacts relationships. And one particular that I thought was fascinating was, and I talk about this in my book, they took two couples and they only had one of the couple be deprived of sleep, and then they took a reporting of how the couple showed up, how both couples showed up, like they were rated their energy and their charisma and all these things, and both scored lower. So even the one that wasn't sleep deprived, they both scored lower. So in relationship, obviously it takes two to tango, but it's interesting even if just one person is sleep deprived, it affects the other person and vice versa, their perception of how they show up in the world, which I thought was really interesting. So yeah, beyond the physical parts of restoring mentally, it's really important, to understand how essential sleep is and the different stages of sleep and sleep quality.
Agreed. And I like how you've brought up the relationship side of things there, because we often don't think about the role that other people might have on our sleep. And everyone's different when it comes to sleep. Some people function really good on 7 hours. Some people need 8 hours. Why
Yeah.
is it that people function so good on different amounts of sleep, different temperatures, and maybe just going on the relationship point for a bit too? How can two people that are sleeping next to each other that have very different sleep demands go about balancing that?
Yeah, those are great questions, and I'll address the first one and then the second one. So it really depends how much sleep you need. Really depends. So it depends on a couple of things: your age, your gender, your lifestyle, where you live. There's so many factors, and as we go throughout our life span, our sleep architecture is going to change. And then there's something called chronobiology. And we each have our unique chronotype. So some people, are morning people, some people are evening type people. And you can take a quiz, it's called an MEQ quiz that I'll actually share with you based off of answering a couple of questions, what type most likely you are. And so, really listening to your natural rhythm, whether you are a night person, evening type, or a morning type, and trying to structure your schedule around that is amazing if you have the luxury of doing it. Oftentimes people don't because they have to get up, go to work, and things like that. But it really does take, most people greatly underestimate the amount of sleep that they need. Most people think that they need less sleep. And it's tricky because your level of energy and performance becomes your status quo. So you might be not getting enough sleep, but you think it's normal. You think that, maybe being a little bit tired, a little bit foggy, that becomes your new norm. Whereas if you just got a little bit more sleep and a little bit better sleep, you'd really notice a big difference in your cognitive ability. You notice a big difference in your energy, your ability to recover. So in regards to sleeping with a bed partner, this can become a challenge. And one of the things that you mentioned is so important to talk about here is temperature, because some people sleep hot and some people like it cooler. Now, the ideal temperature in a bedroom is between 65 and 68 degrees Fahrenheit, which is fairly cold. And so there are some amazing now devices and mattresses and beds and things that can help regulate body temperature for couples. So for instance, if someone sleeps hot and someone likes it a little bit cooler, you can get something like the Chili Pad, which is a great, the Bed Jet. You can get these temperature regulating mattresses like an Essentia mattress that doesn't allow the heat of your body to get stored in the mattress. You can, sleep with separate blankets. This is, they do this in Europe. They, in the States here, most people, a couple sleeps under the same blanket, but in Europe, a lot of times there's two different blankets. So if you are someone that likes it a little bit warmer, a little bit colder, you can add another blanket on. So there's a lot of strategies around how you can kind of optimize your environment. It's important to understand that everybody is different and you got to honor that. If it is a big deal, there are amazing tools. So you got to experiment with it and see what works for you.
I'm glad you brought up environmental optimization because while everyone is different with certain things like temperature, like we just discussed, there are some commonalities amongst all people. And one of the big ones that comes to mind for me is blue light. So we know that avoiding blue light later in the day tends to be beneficial for everyone since blue light inhibits melatonin production. And there's actually light bulbs that people can purchase now, and they can replace the lights in their bedroom or their bathroom or whatever, wherever they spend their time at night, and do a blue light blocking light bulb, which is kind of the next level from just wearing a blue light pair of glasses. And then obviously avoiding screens late at night and all that sort of thing. Are you into blue light glasses and the blue light side of things? Is that something that you find a lot of benefit from with your clients, or is it something that you kind of look at and say it's trendy now, but there's other things we can do that kind of come first?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of other things you can do that come first, but I think it isn't really important because the things that regulate our sleep cycles are light and temperature. So, the circadian lighting I think is fantastic. That's lighting of the future. And even going back to incandescent lighting, without the fluorescent blue light. But I think really what's more important is it's not so much the blue light, but the hyper stimulation that comes along with the devices that the blue light comes from. So in our home, just a quick little hack and thing that works for us is we shut off half the lights as the sun starts to set, and we have red light. So we have infrared red light that we turn on that kind of creates, as well as we have a Himalayan salt lamp, and it kind of just creates this warm sort of cave-like. If you were in a cave, with a fire, that's kind of what you'd come over to my house and you'd walk in. It's just this nice lighting, and it really does start to trigger this sleepiness. The sleep pressure kind of starts to rise. You start to, where most people have all their lights on all the way up until the time that they get into bed. It's stimulating. So, little environmental hacks like that can make a huge difference. But there are many things before that I think people always just want to jump to, getting a mattress or getting some light bulbs, and they miss really addressing like what they're doing throughout the day as far as stress mitigation that really dictates how easy or well they sleep at night.
When it comes to stress mitigation for optimizing sleep, do you typically go with breathing patterns or do you go with avoiding stressors like certain foods and you mentioned the phone, social media, that sort of thing? How do you go about optimizing stress management for sleep?
Yeah, it's really systematic. So when we work with clients in our program at Sleep Science Academy, it's a three-phase approach. So we go first, what are the stressors in the mind? What are the stressors in the body? And then what are the stresses in the environment? So oftentimes for people that have insomnia, it's really understanding, well, what are your self-chosen stressors? Where is mental, emotional stress coming in as far as thoughts, beliefs, things that you're just obsessing over. And then we look at, okay, physically, what are the stressors from nutrition to exercise to, a whole slew of other elements that can affect the physical body. And then we get to the environment. So it's so easy, I think, to overlook little things that we do throughout our day and just miss the boat. Everything you do throughout the day dictates whether or not you're going to be able to fall asleep. So if you start your day in a chaotic, stress way, that stress is going to carry all the way up into the night. Most people take their days into their nights. So there needs to be a buffer from your day and your night. There needs to be space throughout your day. And you need to really start to become aware of like how you feel throughout the day. And if you're feeling stress, I like to give the analogy, it's kind of like a pressure cooker. Like your body and mind start to have this certain tension and pressure build up. And if you're not letting that pressure valve off throughout the day, it's just so much pressure to try to relieve at the end of the day. And that ends up, creating a racing mind, which is like the most common question I get asked. How do you turn your mind off? I can't my mind just keeps me up. And you don't. Your mind's active even when you sleep. But if you create some space throughout your day, if you start implementing some mindfulness and meditation, which is something that I've seen has helped tremendously for the clients that we work with, it really does go a long way. Little things, little hinges swing big doors, and that's very true for sleep.
I love that analogy you mentioned about the pressure cooker. That's great advice. One of the things you mentioned earlier too was that when you don't get a good night's sleep, you feel brain fog, you feel fatigue, you don't focus as clearly. Are there any other signs that people should be watching out for to kind of indicate to them when their sleep is good versus not good?
Yeah, I mean, well, you can't really manage what you don't measure. So I'm a big believer in tracking, and now there's some incredible devices that kind of can help you take the guesswork out of it. We use the Aura Ring. They just launched their Gen 3 ring, which is amazing. It measures heart rate variability throughout the day, as well as throughout the night, body temperature. You could guess, but I don't think you should guess. I think you should test. So rather than trying to guess, I think there is a natural wisdom and intelligence in the body that it's important to get tuned into. But I'm a big believer in better living through science, and there are some amazing tools that can help sort of give you tangible information and data for then you to see, hey, I did this and then it affected me this way. But usually, fatigue is a big one. If you're waking up and you're brain foggy and you're fatigued, that's probably a sign that you didn't get enough sleep or enough quality sleep. And if you're waking up or really if you're waking up in pain, that's a lot of times people wake up and they're inflamed and they're in pain. It's like that's a sign that your body didn't really get into the deeper stages of sleep and flush out what it needed to flush out, and lactic acid and all the things that build up to be able to feel refreshed. So yeah, but I think it's really important, just tracking is so important. So, don't guess, just get a good tracker, get somebody that can help you make sense of the data and then start to make some of these changes and see how much of a difference it actually can make.
Exactly. I love that you brought up the heart rate variability. I think you mentioned Aura Ring. Aura is actually the lowest EMF as well, which we can talk about electromagnetic fields and EMFs and how they impact sleep quality and overall health at a different point. That's a whole nother rabbit hole. But Aura is a great product and great tool. You could also use something like a handheld dynamometer. I think it was Joe DeFranco shared this on his podcast, how he'll have athletes have a handheld dynamometer, and every morning they wake up, they squeeze it as hard as they can. and they get a objective measure of grip strength. So
Mm.
if they recover really well and sleep really good, their grip strength tends to be better that morning. And if they didn't recover well, then their grip strength tends to be lower. And they actually tie that in his training business. They tie how they do on their grip strength test in the morning to what they do in the gym. So if their baseline is 100 pounds of force and they wake up and only push 80 pounds, then they scale everything in the gym back 20% that day, because they know that there's a correlation between your sleep quality and how difficult you perceive a task to be. So you can scale things back and still your body will perceive it as the same difficulty. And the other tool I've used in the past, just from a physical therapy side of things, is the fatigue assessment scale. And this is something, if you're listening, you can Google it and you can probably find a PDF of it pretty easily. It's just a 10-item questionnaire where you rate 10 different questions, 1 to 5, based on how fatigued you feel. And that one, 10-item scale correlates to a whole lot of different outcomes. And this is something you can do daily. You can literally just print it out, circle the things, do it on your laptop, your phone, however you feel, and then just plug that into an Excel document if you're tech savvy. Just something to keep track of all these things. And you don't have to be tech savvy to figure it out. They make all kinds of different apps and different things to track all this. And you might even have something built into your Sleep Science Academy to help track this too, Devin.
Yeah, we use a lot of assessments. We're a big believer in, people it's like if you have high cholesterol, you go to the doctor and he says, okay, well, here's your cholesterol. Here's what we can do. We can change your diet, and exercise, or we can use medication or a combination of all three. And then you test again. And so I love those other strategies that you shared, though. I haven't heard about the handheld diameter. That's very interesting to assess sort of grip strength. Yeah, it's interesting. I find something that's personally, when you wake up if your circadian clock is a little bit dysregulated and you wake up in a wrong stage of sleep, meaning like you're using an alarm clock and it's pulling you out of like deep sleep, it totally makes a difference as far as your mental clarity as well as your ability, your strength. So staging of sleep is important, and it's challenging for people because sometimes people don't, because of the nature of their lifestyles, they don't have the luxury of not waking up without an alarm, right? They have to get up, they're waking up. But now there's great tools that are helping people, like natural light alarm clocks that can kind of help guide the body out of different stages of sleep versus sort of this that then people get pulled out. They're stressed, and usually they're getting pulled out of a bad stage of sleep, and then the rest of the day is just thrown off. So it's interesting. I've experimented that personally, and it for sure makes a difference. That what stage of sleep you wake up in is can totally dictate your strength and focus for the day.
How do you feel about someone who wakes up and immediately, starts their day with that morning cup of coffee? So they go from rested state 0 to full intake of caffeine 100, 0 to 100 real quick. How do you feel about how people start their morning?
I don't feel very good about that, Daniel. I think that's the worst thing you could do, because your cortisol is highest in the morning, and now you're dumping something in that's going to create more cortisol. So you're going to stay sympathetic throughout the entire day, versus if you wait, nothing's wrong. Coffee's an incredible antioxidant. I'm a huge fan of coffee. I love it. I drink it, not every day, but I just like the taste of it. And it has a lot of antioxidants in it, especially when you're getting clean coffee, but not first thing in the morning. We lose about 1 liter of water just through respiration and sweat throughout the night. So you want to make sure that you start the day with, some clean, fresh water. And then, the best time really to have caffeine is an hour or two after you wake up. Let that cortisol start to come down before you dump some caffeine into your system. And caffeine is one of those things. If you use too much of it, it blocks adenosine, which builds up in our bodies that create that sleepiness, sleep pressure, it's called in sleep science. And so you want to be careful that you don't overuse caffeine. And it has a long half-life. It's in our system 5 to 6 hours half-life. So that's in your body, 10 to 12 hours. So you got to be mindful of, timing of caffeine as well. because it definitely can affect sleep quality.
And I like how you brought up the importance of the hydration piece as well. So when we get up, being able to just have, like, 12, 16 ounces of cold water before we get going and start our day can make a huge impact on the rest of our day. And you can even play around with that. You don't have to do just straight filtered water or mineral water or whatever you drink. You could add a little bit of sea salt or a little bit of lemon juice, freshly squeezed, ideally, or something like that to it, because that's going to give you a whole lot of other micronutrients to help you throughout your day. Sea salt itself, I know, contains, I think, 50 or 60 different trace minerals that the body needs. So being able to start your day with all these beneficial micronutrients instead of, a powerful antioxidant, but also a sympathetic overdrive, like we discussed, can really make a huge difference for people. And like you mentioned before, this is the kind of thing you can track, right? You can take note of your mornings, that you wake up and you start your day with coffee. And then you can take note of your mornings that you get up and drink water first. Just see what happens. See if you notice any difference across all the different markers that you're tracking over time.
That's
Uh,
right. I love it. Yeah, I'll share personally what I do is I start the morning actually with seawater. There's a
mm,
company, it's called Quinton, and they make an amazing bioavailable seawater that it's just like a tablespoon that you take, and then I use a custom probiotic that there's a company called Viome. You can get a stool test, and they analyze your stool and they give you a custom probiotic. So what I have been doing is waking up, I have a glass of water with the custom the probiotics in it, and then actually seawater first, and then the probiotic after. That's maybe a little bit extreme for some people, but you can just, everyone's wherever you are on the spectrum of how optimized you want to be. You could start just with water, and then you could start to upgrade your water. Like I think those suggestions that you said, Daniel, are fantastic with sea salt and lemon, and then you could take it to the next level and start drinking seawater and probiotics. So
right. I like it. And you mentioned this earlier. You mentioned that you use red light in your house. And that's the other key element when we wake up, right? Is light. I like to tell people, use the analogy that you water a plant, but it's not going to grow unless it has light. So you're not going to synchronize your circadian rhythm or wake up unless you expose yourself to natural light. So personally, I have a big red light panel right next to my bed. And when I wake up in the morning, I just turn that thing on and start getting exposed to bright lights of different wavelengths to really tune my body and signal that it's time to wake up. It's time for the day to begin. And you mentioned before that you do something similar, I think, with your red light setup as well.
yeah, so in the morning, you actually want to get blue light in the morning, believe it or not. So the sun, the way the sun has all different types of wave. Obviously, the sun is the best light. So
Right.
you want to if you have the availability and you're waking up when the sun comes up, that's getting sunlight on your skin would be ideal. Um, I like blue light in the morning and actually red light, because blue light's going to wake you up. Red light's
Mhm.
going to kind of calm you down. And there's so many different factors and different types of lights and wavelengths and for different reasons. But I like the red light for me in the evening really seems to give me a calm, sort of relaxed effect. And then just for me personally, I just like getting outside and taking a walk. I try to, if you can get outside, this is like the most simplest sleep hack ever. Get outside for more, like as much as you can. Get outside. Like literally, it's the simplest thing ever. I have a goal. I try to spend 5 hours a day outside. A lot of times I don't meet my goal, but it's, we're so like, if you think about it, Daniel, we spend, I think it's 95% of our lives indoors. So you're breathing, air conditioned, you're getting all these, it's just, we're disconnected from the biorhythms of the earth. And there is, this sounds kind of hippie, but there is a frequency of the earth, and that frequency is healing. It's shown to reduce inflammation. And so just getting outside more, is one of the simplest sleep hacks. Like watching the sunset, watching the sunrise, that makes such a big difference with syncing your suprachiasmatic nucleus, the master clock in the brain, which then kind of the body follows suit. So you don't have to go like and spend thousands of dollars on these red light panels unless you want to, like me and Daniel, and you want to play with it and have fun with it. Or you could just go outside and just get some blue light from the sun and red light from the sun when it's setting, and kind of let your body do its thing.
You mentioned the electro frequency there. So when you're outside, do you usually try to ground or earth yourself? Is grounding or earthing something you try to build in throughout your day, like with a special mat or anything like that? Or is that something that's too pseudoscience at this point?
You know what, I do, and depending on who you ask, they're gonna say, oh, that's pseudoscience, or I'm a believer in it. It just feels good to have your feet on the grass or in the sand and just be out of shoes. So I do what feels good, and it feels good for me, so I do it as much as I can. I also, another kind of personal biohack I can share is I stand on a acupressure mat,
Hmm.
and I also stand at a standing desk. So, posture makes a big difference throughout the day, as well as, having a really good supportive mattress that supports healthy posture is important. Just really, I mean, you want to make sure that if your body's out of pain, you're going to sleep better. And I've heard people also that I don't do this, but a lot of people lay on these acupressure mats. They're just these little spiky mats, and it
Hmm.
just I've heard people have told me that, wow, it just makes it a world of difference for sleep and calming down. So, I mean, that's where it gets fun. You can just try to experiment with some of these things. You don't have to go overboard with it. I think there's a term called orthorexia, orthosomnia, where people are obsessed with like the quest for the perfect night of sleep. So you don't want to overdo it, because really, most of the population in the world, they do all the wrong things and they still sleep. So, but if you want to optimize the 1/3 of your life that you spend in bed to make the other 2/3 incredible, then you can start to play with some of these, things that me and Daniel are talking about.
Right. And the acupressure mat is that might come first before the red light panel. It's just a little bit more affordable for people. I think you can get them for like $35 on Amazon. So
That's right. Yeah.
if you're looking at this and you're like, wow, this is all super cool, I want to, start playing around with it, just kind of, keep budget in mind, especially if you're younger or anything like that, because while all these things can help, it's all about finding the perfect combination of tools that work for you. And you might not need to spend thousands of dollars to find that. So start small and work up to it.
I love that. Yeah, I'm a big believer. And I'm sure probably for you, Daniel, I mean, maybe not, but for me, I've definitely over the years slowly started to put tweaks into my routines and upgrades. It wasn't all at once. You don't throw the kitchen sink at something. You just, depending on your lifestyle, your budget, your interests, you just try certain things, and then you see how those things affect you, and then you kind of creep into this. I mean, I definitely, now I have a cold plunge in my living room. It's a little extreme. But yeah, so like, again, I love optimization. This is part of what I do. Teaching people and self-experimentation is part of it, but you don't have to go that far unless you want to. That's everyone. I think it's cool to take things to the edge and really experiment what we're capable of.
Exactly. You've mentioned a couple times now, you've got the Sleep Science Academy, you've got the book, The Sleep Advantage. Where can people find you and find the different things that you're doing?
Yeah, so anyone that has issues with their sleep, Sleep Science Academy, there's a sleep quiz on there. There's a webinar you can watch if you have insomnia. We also offer free consults. And on social, Devin Burke Wellness or Sleep Science Academy as well. So that's where you can find me. If you're, YouTube, I put out some pretty good content, videos and things for people that have sleep issues. But love to, support anyone that was listening to this podcast in any way possible to help them.
Awesome. Anything else you want to share with our listeners, our audience about sleep, about what you do, anything?
Uh, I mean, yeah, just I hope that from listening to this, people realize how important it is, and realize that it is the foundation of health. And it comes first before, most people don't like when I say this, but even before nutrition and exercise. Like if you're not, you could be eating all the right foods, you can be moving your body in all the right ways, but if you're not sleeping, your body's not going to recover. You're going to crave sugar and fat like crazy. Your hormones are going to be off. So really, sleep is the foundation of health. And if you're not really protecting and prioritizing it, then you're doing yourself a big disservice.
I love that. Start from the bottom and work your way up. If you're missing those basic pillars of health and wellness, then all the fancy little tricks and hacks aren't really going to do anything for you. So start from the bottom and work your way up. Devin, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate having you on the show. It was a great episode.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I enjoyed the conversation, and thanks for the work that you're doing and all the knowledge that you're bringing to your audience. It's good stuff.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Brawn Body Health and Fitness Podcast. If you liked this episode, please make sure to share it with a friend, subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes, and leave a review. This way we can spread knowledge and motivation and help reach more people. Thank you again for listening, and I'll see you next time.